Hello everybody, I hope you're all okay. Today I thought I would read you a story, and this story has a very famous bear in it. Do you think you might be able to guess which bear it is? Well done if you said Paddington Bear. You were right, and I'm sure you all know that Paddington likes to get up to lots of mischief. Today I'm going to read you Paddington Goes for Gold, and it's written by Michael Bond. I hope you all enjoy it. One morning, Paddington was lingering by the Browns' front door at number 32 Windsor Gardens, in case a postcard arrived from his Aunt Lucy in Peru, when to his surprise a leaflet came through the letterbox and landed on his nose. Paddington didn't normally take much notice of leaflets, and he was about to throw it in the nearest waste bin when the words "free entry" and "prizes" caught his eye. It sounded much more interesting than usual, so he decided to show the leaflet to Mr. Brown when he came home from work that evening. "It's from the local sports club," explained Mr. Brown over dinner that evening. "They're holding a fundraising event tomorrow. There's something for everyone and prizes galore." "There's even a knitting competition," announced Paddington, "for Mrs. Bird's benefit." The Browns' housekeeper gave a non-committal grunt. "Let's go, Dad," chorused Jonathan and Judy. "It sounds fun." "Well," began Mr. Brown, "I was picturing a round of golf." "I'll iron your shorts, Henry," said Mrs. Brown. "They could do with an airing." "If they still fit me," said Mr. Brown gloomily. The Browns set off in high spirits early the next day, but it was short-lived, for as they entered the sports ground, the first person they bumped into was Mr. Curry. Their next-door neighbour could put a damper on anything. Worse still, he was making a beeline for Paddington. "I suppose it had to happen," murmured Mr. Brown. "That leaflet must have gone to all the houses in our area." "Hold this ball for a moment, Bear," boomed Mr. Curry, thrusting a round object in Paddington's paws. Mr. Curry roared with laughter as Paddington staggered backwards. "Caught you out for once, Bear," he chuckled. "It's made of lead and it's used for what's called putting the shot. You're supposed to throw it as hard as you can." Mrs. Bird took a firm grip of her handbag, but she had no need of it, for Mr. Curry suddenly gave a roar of pain. "Bear," he bellowed, hopping on one leg, "what do you think you're doing?" "You said I was supposed to throw it," exclaimed Paddington. "I'm afraid it didn't go very far." "Far enough to land on my foot. I don't forget things in a hurry," cried Mr. Curry. Dear. "No prizes there, I'm afraid," called a steward, joining the group. "Anyone for the three-legged race? You'd better hurry. It's about to start." Jonathan and Judy made a dash for it, closely followed by Paddington, only too anxious to escape Mr. Curry's wrath. "But you've got 4 legs between you," Paddington hissed. 2 and 2 makes 4. "Don't worry," Judy removed her ribbon. "If we tie 2 of them together, that makes 3. "Leave it to me," said Paddington. "Bears are good at knots." "Ready?" called the starter. "Steady? Go!" Jonathan tore off straight away, but Judy was unable to move. "Oh dear," said Paddington. "I think I must have tied the wrong 2 legs together by mistake." "No prizes there either, I'm afraid," said the steward. He turned to Mr. Brown. "Shall I put you down for the 100-metre hurdles?" "Actually," said Mr. Brown, "I rather fancy the slow bicycle race. I used to be a dab hand at it when I was a boy." "I'm up for the knitting competition," said Mrs. Bird. "I've brought my own needles." "Good, good," said the steward. He turned to Mrs. Brown. "And you, dear lady?" "I want to keep an eye on my husband," said Mrs. Brown firmly. Paddington found it hard to see what was going on when he joined the crowd at the start of the race, but he pricked up his ears when he heard Mrs. Brown say she was worried Mr. Brown might fall off his bicycle. "He's going ever so slowly," agreed Judy. "Leave it to me, everybody," said Paddington, and he ran onto the track as fast as he could. "Don't worry, Mr. Brown," he called. "I'm here." grasping the bicycle saddle with both paws, should I say, with all his might, and Mr. Brown sailed past all the other contestants in a flash. "Why ever did you do that?" cried Mr. Brown. "The last one past the tape is first in a slow bicycle race. I could have been a contender." "I'm sorry, Mr. Brown," gasped Paddington. "I thought it was a funny name for a race, but we didn't have them in darkest Peru." "Don't worry, Dad," called Jonathan from a nearby tent. "Wait until you see Mrs. Bird's knitting. She's on a winning streak." "Look at her needles," agreed Judy. "They're going like windmills. I hope she doesn't do herself a mischief." "I expect she could do with a marmalade sandwich," said Paddington. "I brought some specially." "Don't stop, Mrs. Bird," he called. "I'm coming." The Browns' housekeeper had her hands full, so he popped a sandwich into her open mouth. Mrs. Bird gave a gurgle, but she didn't slow down. "That's torn it," said Judy. "If Mrs. Bird gets marmalade over her needles, she won't be pleased." "It's probably against the rules to feed competitors," said Mr. Brown. Jonathan gave a groan. "What's Paddington up to now?" he said. "I found some more wool if you run out, Mrs. Bird," called Paddington. Spluttered Mrs. Bird, shaking her head violently. Paddington set to work. He had his back to Mrs. Bird, so he didn't notice that as he wound the wool into a ball, her piece of knitting grew smaller and smaller. Said Mrs. Bird. "How on earth did he manage to do that?" asked Mr. Brown. "Don't even ask, Henry," replied Mrs. Brown. "Bang goes our last chance of a prize," groaned Judy. "We can't give up now," said Jonathan. "They're getting ready for the relay race. Who's for making up a foursome?" Paddington's paw shot up. Judy raised her hand, and after a moment, Mr. Brown joined them. "In for a penny, in for a pound," he said. Judy made the first circuit of the track before passing the baton to Jonathan, who in turn passed it to Paddington. "Whatever you do," he gasped, "don't drop it." Mr. Brown was ready and waiting as the familiar figure rounded the bend. "Where is it?" he cried as Paddington drew alongside him. "The baton! Where is it?" "I don't know, Mr. Brown," gasped Paddington. "I had it when I left." "You had it when you left?" repeated Mr. Brown. "What do you mean you had it when you left?" Paddington did his best to think of another way of saying it. "Jonathan told me not to drop it," he said, "so I put it somewhere for safekeeping." "I don't believe it," groaned Mr. Brown. As the race came to an end, everybody cheered and began waving their hats in the air, so Paddington joined in. "There it is!" cried Mrs. Brown, pointing at Paddington's head. "It was under his hat all the time." "I remember now," said Paddington. "Don't be cross, Henry," said Mrs. Brown. "It isn't as though he dropped it." "Cross?" repeated Mr. Brown. "Have you seen it? I'm thankful he didn't give it to me. It's covered in marmalade. I think it's time we went home." As the Browns were leaving, a man on the gate handed Paddington an envelope. "It's a small thank you," he said. "You are our very first bear contestant, and you seem to have brought us luck. Visitors have been flooding in." The envelope contained a medal made of gold foil, and it had a ribbon attached so that Paddington could hang it round his neck. There was some writing across the front, but he was too excited to read it. "I think," he announced, "I shall show it to Mr. Curry. It might make his leg better." "Mr. Curry doesn't deserve it," began Mrs. Bird. But Paddington was already on his way, and by the time they caught up with him, all they heard was a cry of "Bear!" followed by a loud bang. "Whatever happened?" asked Judy as Paddington reappeared. "Well," said Paddington, "when I showed Mr. Curry my medal, he started hopping about on one leg, but it was the wrong one, and when I mentioned it, he slammed the door in my face." "It's a pity you didn't mention the words on the front of the medal," said Mr. Brown. "Winning isn't everything. Taking part and doing your best is what matters most." "I would rather someone else did that," said Paddington politely. I don't think Mr. Curry likes my mentions. After you, Henry, said Mrs. Brown, amid laughter all around. Hopefully you all enjoyed that story, and hopefully see you soon, everyone. Keep smiling. Bye-bye.